Hello and welcome to Securosys Firestarter. I'm Rich Mogul and it is March 2nd. Hopefully we actually get this out on March 2nd. 2015, 16, 17. I freaking gave up keeping track of those things anymore. All right, joining me this week as usual, Mike Rothman. Hey, Mike.
Dude, you totally blew my eardrums out. Hello! It's like, hey, settle down, Robin Williams there. I mean, I know we want to leave a tribute to him after the Oscars on Sunday night, but settle down a little bit there. Everybody has to maintain their hearing.
Mike is actually, you might notice a new background. He's at what, like a VRBO or an Airbnb?
Yeah, Airbnb, and they have this computer. I don't know if you guys can see that up
We
there.
can.
That's awesome.
That is a circa 19, probably 98 iMac. Maybe not 98, but it is, I came in here as one of the Marshmallow iMacs, and it was like I just was howling yesterday because it's old school, right? I haven't, I'm too scared to turn it on. I think it's like a classic or, I just don't want to mess around with that. But it was very entertaining to see the old iMac Marshmallow here at the Airbnb where I'm staying.
Nice. And Adrian, well, you're where you always are.
Yeah, right here in Phoenix where it never rains. Only it's been raining for the last 3 days. So
We we haven't gotten a drop down here, so
no,
until today, maybe a little bit at night or something. But I know, and here we are whining about it. I know we have some people in places like Boston listening to this.
Yeah, with 9 feet of snow ready
No.
to melt. I mean, those people. I hope you folks are working on your arcs because once that snow melts, take the dog, maybe
Uh,
two out of the kids because you're only allowed to bring two of each species. So bring two of the kids and get on the boat because it is going to be a little soggy there for quite a while.
nice, nice. By the way, Mike, speaking of that old computer there, I mean, one little tech note. I hadn't used a Raspberry Pi at all, and I got one for my nephew. So he was out to visit because we had some kids' birthdays over the weekend, and he's 11. Oh my God. Like I knew I had read that they had designed it to like teach kids what it was like to, like what we had with our Commodore 64s and stuff. But I mean, aside from the size, which is pretty cool, but we just plug it into the TV. He's got a Unix system. The new versions are actually pretty speedy with those ARM processors. And he was just like, "Are you serious? You just gave me a computer I can carry with me?" I'm like, "Yeah." I mean, okay, you need a keyboard, a mouse, and a power supply also, but you could like put your Minecraft server on that and plug it in anywhere with the Wi-Fi. And then I got him the breadboard and I plugged it in. We had him like using Scratch to light up lights and detect when switches were pushed and everything else before the end of the trip. So, man, I can't wait
You
till my
did.
kids are a little bit older so we can do that.
You had your own hack kid, right at Shea
We did.
Mogul over the weekend. How about that?
Mostly you want to play Disney Infinity, but there you go. All right, so news last week. I actually ended up doing an interview with the BBC. Not that I was qualified at all, but I was what was available to them. About a report came out from an intelligence estimate that basically here in the U.S. that said the risk of cyber attacks is a greater threat to national security than terrorism. And I will obviously get into what I thought about that when we did the interview. But you guys, well, Adrian, let's go to you first because occasionally we underestimate your politics, and then
do I think it's a greater threat? Yeah, I mean, all of the SCADA systems out there, we know that they're fully vulnerable. We know that they're ancient systems that are wide open to the internet. But it's hard to compare the two because they're just such different acts. And I don't know. I haven't paid real close attention to the debate, but it just seems to me that we know that most of our critical infrastructure got shoved onto the internet somewhere in the late 90s and was completely incapable of being secured. So, I guess I'm kind of nonplussed by the assertion.
Mike.
Define terrorism for me.
Well, there's an actual FBI terror definition, which is the one that I've always used, which is the use of force or threat of force to, or the use of force to that causes significant damage or loss of life for a political agenda, something along those lines. And I'll
Right.
look that up while we're talking. But
No, that's fine.
yeah,
Where I was going is that I'm not sure there's a difference. Now, sure, there's the let me get somebody who has no value of their own life and kind of strap a vest to yourself and blow some stuff up. I get that aspect of terrorism and destroying property and killing people and that kind of thing. But kind of where Adrian went with kind of the frailty of our critical infrastructure. Again, I mean, I think that's much more of an adversary thing than it is than is it somebody strapping a vest to themselves, or is it somebody trying to knock down the power grid in an industrialized country, right? If it's a terrorist type of adversary, if ISIS or ISIL, whatever you want to call them, decide to hire or contract out some hackers, as evidently the North Koreans did. Is that terrorism? Is that cyber war? I don't know, right? So again, I mean, I think that one of the fallacies of that kind of research is that there's no standard set of vernacular or definitions for what we're talking about with that stuff. I mean, listen, if one of these kind of crazy adversaries, gets access to, talented computer attackers that can, penetrate critical infrastructure and can do destructive things, yeah, man, that's a friggin' critical threat, right? I mean, that's when you kind of sit there and go, do you have a plan in place to be able to live without electricity for 10 days, right? Because that's the kind of stuff that'll happen because those infrastructure is so brittle. But cyber war versus again, regular war. I just get confused by all these definitions, which is why it's hard for me to parse that question.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know why I spend more time with this stuff. I think that a couple of things. One is when they said cyber attacks, they meant that it was more damaging to our economy and potentially more enabled anybody we may have future conflicts with, which I fully agree with. I mean, if you really think about it, we are undergoing, sustained damage to our economy on a daily basis from not just, China stealing stuff and giving it to their manufacturers, but from, cyber attacks out of, the financially motivated, pure criminal side of cyber attacks, costing us on a financial basis, to the ability of foreign actors to potentially embed in our infrastructure, which is the piece that Adrian was addressing. You combine all of those, which is really, because they were very clear when they said this. It's all of these categories, the concepts of cyber security in general, combined together was a greater risk than to the health of our nation.
Again, I'll push back a little bit in terms of I don't know how you separate those two out because I know a lot of the fraud that we see is used to fund a lot of those traditional more terrorism type things. So they're laundering money through all sorts of different ways using a lot of these techniques. They're kind of extracting that money to fund a lot of the
oh, that's in there too.
Type of activities. So again, I mean, I guess I'm just pushing back a little bit on. I don't really kind of see the difference. I mean, think about the opportunity costs, right? Not that I'm gonna kind of show my card, but this is the third card I've had from the same friggin' kind of company in the last 2.5 months. Right, my card's getting popped once a month now. And there's clearly an opportunity cost to that too, right? They got to shut the thing down. They got to, worry about all the transactions. They got to send me a new card. I got to go back and, it takes me time to get all of my automatic transactions, kind of done in place. So, and again, I mean, I think when we think about, I don't know whether I'm ready to sit here and say one is a bigger risk than the other. I think one is an integral part of almost everything. It's hard for me to separate out kind of a lot of these, let's call them cyber attacks from every other kind of aspect, fraud, war.
Mike,
I mean,
Mike, you're having okay. You're having an argument that almost in the wrong direction here. First of all, the reports basically didn't break out those differences. They said that cyber attacks in general, and this is my understanding. I didn't read all of the pieces of the report, but for the pieces that I did read, collectively is a greater threat than physical terrorism. And so, and by the way, it's used to fund it. We know that. Although, there's a lot of other crime, mostly drug trade stuff that's used to fund it, I guess. I don't know. That's not my area of expertise. And if we look at, actual terrorism, the true definition, that I mean, look, the war on terrorism is a really stupid name because it's a war on a concept. But if you actually, look at, how it's defined, it's, use of violence to change the politics of a nation or something else. It has been completely misused by a lot in the political realm and the media and everything else. But those in the national security, piece of this. They kind of know those differences. And we're dumping tons and tons and tons of money in there. I mean, trillions of dollars. And yet, if you really look at what is more of a longer, more of a risk to, the functioning of our economy and everything else, then cyber would be higher. So I do see the distinctions between the two. I think those lines are clear. Obviously, they can bleed into each other in a few areas, but if you look at the big picture of it, somebody coming over here and dropping
So
bombs versus
is your issue resource allocation? In that,
it
we
becomes
spend
a
a
resource
trillion,
allocation
we
issue.
spend $1 trillion to ensure the flow of petroleum to kind of all different aspects of the world. Yet we can't spend two fucking hot nickels on protecting applications that provide the funding for a lot of all these kind of things. Is that what you're kind of pushing back against? Yeah, and by the way, I agree with that. Right. I mean, that was something I was having an email exchange with a client, kind of just this morning about, kind of the fact that we can't seem to continue to fund the things that provide the most or present the most attack surface and risk to the things that, we're kind of tasked to prevent and protect. So, I mean, I get that aspect of it, and I get kind of the whole intertwined thing of it, but I'm just trying to water down what are we arguing here? Because, listen, if you want me to tilt at a windmill, I'm happy to do that all day. Right?
No,
I
we're
just,
not arguing anything. You just said you want to have an argument about this, so we picked it as the topic.
listen,
You're like,
I'm
there you go.
feeling, yeah, I want to argue today. So let's find something to argue. I'm all uppity. I'm uppity today.
So what's interesting though, which goes back to the terminology stuff that you mentioned, and was kind of what I wrote the Friday summary about was, we love to throw cyber in front of things, and cyber attacks, that works for me. Cyber, I think, is a clean term. People understand it. We've talked about that before, but and now we're finding this. People are using the cyber war and the warrior thing. And look, now first of all, it's not just around IT security and cyber war stuff, and there's this misuse of the term warrior in war all the time. I mean, no offense, guys, you're not a warrior because you did a weekend adventure race, or you're really good at a video game. You're a warrior when you stick a knife into somebody's stomach and you gut them because they were coming after you, and warriors do. They kill people. That's their job. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I mean, I'm saying that's what it is. And we're now trying to extend this definition because everybody wants this warrior mindset because they do jujitsu and maybe got into a street fighter too, and makes them a warrior. It's bullshit. And instead, if you actually look at what's going on with us, it's we like to think in terms of offense and defenders, and I'm offensive security and I'm a defender and everything else. And if I look at actually what's really going, and you tie it to this intelligence report and kind of what's going on at that level, it really is more of this combination of these long-term cons and espionage games, and we got to be spies. We don't need to be counter-espionage agents, not warriors, because you're never going to see the guy sitting there in front of you. Attribution is hard, and that's what comes out of that whole world. And I find it really interesting that we're seeing this move towards this this warrior type of a culture, defender type of a culture. And I use the term defender myself. And when you get down to it, I think we're more counterintelligence agents on the defensive side, and intelligence operatives on the offensive side, because it's that crazy shifting game.
So who's the hybrid, right? We need a James Bond, the James Bond analogy of cyber.
I don't know. Apparently, it wasn't the Black Hat movie. Yeah, I don't know who that is, or have we just beaten this one to death and we're just stretching on a Monday morning?
Well, I just don't know why neither of you read the report and didn't think that this was just for budgetary cycles, that this was yet another report to get the topic into the public mind, to start the conversation, to get money, I mean, so we can talk about whether one is a bigger threat than the other, but that doesn't really seem to be the intent of the report to me. It seems to be awareness and hey, we need budget because my department has a whole bunch of people that need their salaries paid.
Fear continues to be, the preeminent motivator of everything. So why would this be any different than anything else?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Adrian. I mean, budget stuff is probably a huge part of this, and always has been. And it's one of the reasons I think actually a lot of our federal level cyber stuff is so messed up is because for over for a solid decade or more now, a bunch of agencies are fighting over because they all want to be in control, of this particular issue. Not that any one of them can be or should be.
Yeah, we can't get into it now, but I think a good topic. So we'll sprinkle a little, kind of preemptive, or foreshadowing for next week's recording. But that Adrian, that brings up a great point, right? Which is how sustainable is this? I mean, we're all old guys, so we've all kind of been through a bunch of different cycles here. We've seen security be, obviously it's never been as sexy as it is now, but it's gone through different levels of, kind of interest. It's gone through different levels of funding, and every time guys like us sit there and say, "Oh man, there's no abating. This is just going to continue to, move forward, and folks are going to continue to invest until they don't." Right? Because at some point they kind of get exhausted and just be like, you know what, I could spend another $10 on this and I'm going to get maybe 50 cents worth of value. So screw it. I'm going to spend $5 less and see what happens. Right. And that's been the cycle that we've seen over and over again. So how close are we to that? Right. I mean, because man, I mean, it is now front page. It is in the topic of every board meeting. It is, I mean, this is the big stuff now. So, at some point, like with everything else, folks are going to get fatigued. So I think next week maybe we should tackle, when does that fatigue set in, right? Is it at mile 6 or is it at mile 19? Which we'll find out, right? I may get to 6 tomorrow. We're supposed to get to 19 tomorrow. So we'll see. We'll see what's going to happen with that.
Yeah, literally, I'm supposed to run 19 miles tomorrow for my training program. That's yeah. So there you go. All right. Well, we'll we've got foreshadowing for next week or for something for next week.
Now the question is, are any of us going to remember that?
Remember
What are we going to talk about? What did we say?
Not
Who
a
said
chance.
that?
Not a chance. So let's be honest. You guys can tell when we plan a little bit more for these versus when we have to spend a little bit more time looking for a subject. So anyway, with that, we'll probably have to record on Friday because Monday morning is going to be the Apple Watch event. We all got to watch that to see how our lives are going to be better and changed. And fanboy. I left you the opening. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us again this week. We'll let this one go, and we will be back next week, maybe with a topic, maybe not. We don't know. All right.